Welcome back to the Global Digital Asset Regulatory Summit. My name is Amy Rose and I'm the CEO of the Digital Economy Council of Australia. We are around 4.5 hours in. I think we've just got just over 5 hours or around 5 hours to go as we make our way across the globe. At the moment, we are about to launch into a very timely conversation with our local regulators, ASIC and Treasury. This is a really important conversation because here at home we are at a turning point. There was a release this morning of draft legislation that we will be consulting on as an industry association with our industry far and wide. So we do recommend that you tune into this conversation up next and reach out directly to DECA to contribute to the response that we offer the Australian government. Without further ado, I am going to bring our speakers onto stage. They are waiting. This session will be moderated by Paul Derham. He is our chair at DECA. Paul, I will hand it over to you to introduce the session and your guests and dive pretty deep, I expect, into the recent news today and what we can expect. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Amy Rose. Hi, everyone. Thanks for dialing in, and some of you will have been sitting in on various live streams since 8 a.m. and probably having a bit of information overload, and the information overload is going to continue, but luckily this is watchable as play on demand if you want to go back to it. We're really lucky to have three guests on this panel session today. We've got Claire in my bottom left corner. We've got Chris and Dr. Bollen with Rhys. So thanks everyone for joining. The purpose of this conversation is really to understand a little bit more about the regulatory reform that's happening right now in Australia. So today, Treasury has announced, as many of you will have seen this morning, some reforms to regulate crypto. And this has been almost 2 years since the original consultation came out, and a lot of work has been done by a lot of people. And so what we're going to do today is we're just going to talk about it. We're just going to sort of touch on some of the issues, and we've got a few questions that we want to cover. So I won't spend much more time other than to say most of you will know me. I'm Paul, the chair of the board for the Digital Economy Council of Australia and also managing partner of Holley Nethercote Lawyers, one of Australia's leading financial services reg firms. We act for a lot of the sector. And so this is something that's close to the heart of all the law firms out there in this sector. They've been waiting for this for a long time. And obviously there's still a lot of work to go. This is just exposure draft that we're talking about from Treasury. And then we're talking about guidance and interpretation of the existing law from ASIC. So we all need to work together to pave a way here, and so it's really good that Treasury and ASIC both agreed to be in the same session. So thank you for doing that. So maybe if I introduce each of the speakers, we've got Claire, who's the Assistant Secretary in Payments, Scams and Innovation Branch. It's a mouthful, so you're across a pretty wide portfolio there, Claire. Feel free to add to that when I throw to you in a second, because I understand that you're across quite a lot of different moving parts, projects, and so anyway, we're grateful for you to be here. We've also got Chris. Many of you will know Chris, who has been one of the architects of this new law since even preparing the consultation paper that came out 2 years ago. And I know Chris. We like to get to know each other a little bit better, and I know that I describe Chris's job as renovating the Corporations Act. It is 24 years old. And at the same time, he's also renovating the house that you see him in the Adelaide Hills. So that's one of his hobbies. And so Chris has a better subject matter understanding of the exposure draft reforms than, in my view, than pretty much anyone. But there are quite a few, quite a big team that's been working on it for a very long time. There's been consultations, feedback, consultations, feedback. If you go back even further, there's been Senate inquiries. We now have exposure draft legislation, which is a very big step because now we can see what it looks like. So Chris will be asking you some questions as well. And also Dr. Bollen or Rhys, head of the digital asset team at ASIC. And Rhys, I'm sure all of you will know him. Rhys has been very gracious to be a very public space to digital asset reform. In the past, there hasn't been as much consultation with ASIC, in my experience as a financial services lawyer of 20-something years. Rhys has definitely been out there and attending the conferences, speaking to people more than typical in that sort of role. Rhys is an academic as well. He does specialise. His background focuses on payments and electronic cash. Even back in 2013, in order to teach his students about Bitcoin, I think Rhys, you bought a bit of Bitcoin, sold it, made a little profit, and bought yourself a surfboard. Is that right?
I did. I still have it.
You still have it? Well, there is no such thing as too many surfboards. So completely understand that. So really grateful to have you here, Rhys, as well. Now, let's jump straight into the questions. Claire, if I can go to you first. Let's start big picture. What is the government trying to deliver right now? And sort of what sort of tell us about the plan.
Thanks, Paul, for that. And actually, I might actually just kick off with the first thing that you said about elaborating on the branch, because it actually is, so it is a payments, scams and innovation branch. It actually is newly created. It used to just be a payment and innovation branch, and we used to have scams separate, and the decision was to put it all together in the digital division. And the idea is about needing to get the settings right, like for the digital economy. But there's also a little bit about the idea of not wanting to have like double up of obligations, about making sure we're looking at where obligations already exist and where we can leverage them and things like that. So I did just want to highlight that from the point of view of, we were seeing a lot of synergies between those reform proposals, and that was the notion of bringing scams into the same space of the payments work and the innovation work as well. And so the branch has actually in this form only existed for a couple of months now. But to go a bit big picture, for those of you that have been on the line since 8 o'clock this morning, hopefully you did hear the Assistant Treasurer. He did set out quite a detailed plan of what the government's doing. That they've got a comprehensive agenda of what they'd like to do in the digital economy space. I wouldn't want to rehash that, but I will just highlight a couple of the initiatives which are like quite relevant, particularly to the digital assets. So hopefully most of you do know that there was the digital asset roadmap, and the intention of that was really to support innovation, kind of protect consumers and uphold market integrity. That was put out at the start of this year. And the main priorities, I guess, as you would know, we've got the legislation out now, but and that's going to be the focus for the remainder of the year. We do really want to get the legislative settings right. So we've got those kind of frameworks for digital asset providers, but also stable coins. So they were set out in the roadmap. So obviously we've got the consultation out. We do want to thank stakeholders. I know you've been waiting eagerly for it. You have been engaging for quite a while. That engagement has been crucial, I guess, to be able to be put it out. We will continue to engage with you on it. In terms of the proposed framework for stable coins, that's going to be part of the proposed payment licensing laws. I hate to comment on when we think things will be, because obviously that's a decision for government. But we are hoping that government will be in a position to commence consultation on that in hopefully the next couple weeks. So obviously, please keep watching the space. But they're really crucial reforms. People have been asking for them. Consumers need to have confidence in the system. So it needs to be the focus, particularly for the remainder of this year. I guess like another key piece, and for any of you that were at Intersect last week, you would have heard me talk about it. We're going to support the government to kind of stand up the review of the sandbox, and we're hoping for that to kick off by the end of this year. The key thing to say is it was always intended in the law to have a review of the sandbox. It's one of those things where at the right time, it's always useful to look at these things and go, are they delivering on what they were intended to do? Is it supporting the necessary innovation? And that's what will be the point of that review. And we're hoping that will start by the end of this year. And so for those of you that heard the Assistant Treasurer talk this morning, I think like one of the key things is there is a really strong focus from this government about productivity. And like this term, they're going to really focus on it. So you would have heard the Assistant Treasurer talking about wanting to support more innovation. How can we get more, like, what can we get from these digital technologies? It's not just the Assistant Treasurer that says that. You'll hear that come from a lot of ministers across a lot of the different portfolios. And so like one of the things, I guess, here in kind of discussions this morning, like we've heard about like pathways that stable coins can offer in like broader tokenization. So maybe just one of the other things to kind of call out is that, you know, Treasury is working with the Digital Finance CRC and other key regulators. So that's, you know, RBA, ASIC and APRA to progress Project Acacia. And that project's like a really useful thing to kind of help our policy thinking about how like digital forms of digital money infrastructure can support the development of wholesale tokenization in Australia. So I guess like really just wrapping up, it's like, you know, as the Assistant Treasurer said, you know, it's about like we need to get these digital asset platform reforms right so we can kind of get the foundations right for tokenization. So that's probably the main thing that the government's focused on.
Thanks, Claire. Excellent. Now let's go to the next level of detail. Chris, the exposure draft is titled Treasury Laws Amendment Bill 2025, Digital Asset, and Tokenized Custody, platforms. So there's two platforms, two different new financial products that will be added to the licensing framework in Australia under these proposals. So to set the scene for everyone, the way licensing works for an Australian financial services license in Australia is if you're in the business of providing a financial service in this jurisdiction, you need a license covering the provision of those services. There's approximately 10 financial services, and those services are provided with regard in respect of approximately 20 or so financial products to approximately two categories of client, retail and wholesale. So you've got services, products, clients, and Treasury is proposing, government is proposing to add two financial products to that list of approximately 20 financial products out there. Tell us what that means, Chris. What does that look like in practice? The people watching this, as we've discussed before, are traditional finance businesses, startups, globals wanting to come into Australia, people in the native crypto space who are completely unregulated. They might be registered with AUSTRAC, and then people that are just really interested in the sector. There's probably people watching trying to get a hot tip for the next token. We're not going to help those people at all. We're really focusing on helping businesses navigate this. So, Chris, tell us more.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. So yeah, two new financial products. So as you said, there's, you know, under our existing law, we have products and services. What we're doing is pointing to something that we see, but based on feedback over, you know, multiple consultations as being kind of the riskiest area. So naming something as a financial product really means, you know, pointing to any kind of sort of arrangement that you know, could have, say, you know, particular risks that can be mitigated through the financial services laws. So we've pointed to two here. So digital asset platforms. So they're sort of arrangements you know, between a provider and operator for holding digital tokens on behalf of a client, and they can also sort of facilitate, I guess, transactions in those digital tokens or digital assets that they're holding. So I think everyone will be kind of familiar with what we mean by digital asset platform. Tokenized custody platform we've put in as a separate product. So it was talked about in the Regulating Digital Asset Platforms proposal paper back in 2023, but in a slightly different way. I think we used the term sort of financialized functions and listed a number of them. But we've sort of called it out here as a separate type of arrangement, which is, you know, fundamentally very similar to a digital asset platform, but instead of holding on to, you know, digital assets or digital tokens and providing that custody role, it would hold on to any assets. It could hold any assets, so it would be a custodian. So that might be, you know, a bar of gold, but it could also be a financial product like a bond. And the unique thing about a tokenized custody platform is that instead of sort of holding these assets for account holders, they're actually holding the assets for token holders. So they create tokens at the same time as they as they begin to custody these assets, and those tokens go off into the wild and be held in people's sort of private wallets, or might even go onto digital asset platforms to be traded. And under this kind of this model that we have here, a tokenized custody platform would be able to facilitate sort of transactions as well in those underlying assets. So it holds a bond, given the correct sort of authorizations, it would be able to go and source that from the market. So it'd be able to source a bond to hold as custodian and create a token for that person, the client, to kind of hold, and it could go out. So that's, I guess, the basics of the two. Maybe to go into some sort of detail, the thinking behind it. We didn't want to do a square peg round hole situation, but we also didn't want to, I guess, reinvent the wheel. So a lot of obligations that would apply automatically to someone providing a financial service in relation to a listed kind of financial product. So by adding these two new financial products, various things sort of automatically happen, and a lot of those are sort of consumer protection things. And one of the real, I guess, goals of the consultations we've done has been to identify sort of what works for in the digital asset sphere, or what do we need to do that's tailored, and what don't we? So things like the general obligations. I think the feedback that we got was that these are requirements that exist under the financial services laws for good reason, and those reasons don't change when the thing being held, or the financial kind of service being provided, relates to digital tokens. So that's things like ensuring you're managing conflicts of interest, having appropriately qualified staff, and these sort of things. So those are applied, and then there's I guess a bunch of additional kind of more specific obligations or tailored obligations that would apply specifically to sort of operators of any of these two products. So there's a kind of a slightly tailored disclosure regime, very much based off one that was sort of created by ASIC for this product that exists already, or product/service that exists already, called an investor-directed portfolio service. So it ensures that the assets being held by the custodian, in this case the sort of operator of the digital asset platform, tokenized custody platform, ensures that they're providing the level of information to the customer that they would have received if they had held that that product sort of directly. And so it's sort of like a pass-through, you could call it a sort of pass-through regime. So the disclosure gets done that way, and so that's sort of a tailored one. And then there's a few others that perhaps you picked up in the short time that you've had the bill or the EM so far, but won't necessarily go into detail with that. So yeah, I think that probably provides that high level kind of overview.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And lots of people will have lots of questions, and no doubt people have been dropping the explanatory memorandum and exposure draft into ChatGPT and asking it questions about all of this. And so no doubt you'll all be reaching out to your lawyers, people watching this, to start to navigate, to start to try and map out what the future looks like. Obviously, this is exposure draft, isn't it? So that means there will be further consultation. Once it's finalised, it will be presented, tabled in Parliament as a bill, and you obviously have no control over when that happens. And then if it sails through Parliament and gets royal assent, then I think the proposal is about a 12-month transition period. Is that right? If it remains intact as planned?
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, I guess the entire transition period goes beyond that 12 months. So there's a few, so 12 months after royal assent, we'd have sort of commencement. People can start applying for new licenses to vary their existing licenses. but the obligations themselves won't come into force. So sort of 18 months after royal assent will be when the obligations would apply to kind of everyone except for people or businesses that still have applications pending. So then there's this sort of relief that comes in that says, if your application has been sort of accepted by ASIC, I think might be the wording, then you'll have an extra, I think it is 6 months when the transition period sort of truly ends. I think we released some sort of questions as well with the with all the materials today, and one of them does ask, whether this transition period is appropriate, and whether you need more, less time, more time, and whatnot. So very keen to hear from people on that question.
Good, thanks, Chris. And if any of you are private practice lawyers watching this, I'd encourage you to reach out to DECA. We'll be coordinating all the responses and thoughts to try and get to see where we can come to agreement and put them all together like we've done in the past as an industry body. So thanks, Chris, for that. In my experience in consultation periods, industry always asks for longer. I remember accountants got 3 years as a transition period for the limited licensing regime. And we still had so many accountants, like days before the regime was coming into effect, starting to contact us asking what do they have to do. So we'll see how that plays out. But the point that you've made, Chris, is that there's now this fairly long runway, right? So we have a bridging period, and Rhys, this is almost the perfect segue to ask you some questions. Right now, the law is what the law is. ASIC has a mandate to regulate the law as it stands, but ASIC is also trying to provide this sort of bridging support and still do its job. So Rhys, tell us what's the latest? How is ASIC part of this?
That's right. So we will be implementing the reforms even when they're passed by the Parliament. But in the meantime, as you say, we're tasked with administering the current law, and that means licensing the folk who need licensing and dealing with anyone on the regulatory perimeter. As you say, we've been working hard to update our guidance as to how we understand product and service categories and how they apply to crypto and digital assets. We consulted late last year. We got a really healthy number of submissions, and you may have heard our chair last week in parliamentary committee saying our updated guidance is close. It'll be I think in the coming weeks is probably the best way I can describe it. So it has been reviewed by our commission. We're putting the final touches on it, and there's some formalities involved in a couple of instruments that support it. But in the coming weeks, you'll see that, and we will give a period of time for people to digest that and apply for any license that they might need. So part of that announcement will be a no action period during which we expect people to review that updated guidance, get whatever advice they need, and apply for whatever licenses they might need. So that'll be part of that announcement when we update our crypto guidance.
Thanks, Rhys. And no action. Relief comes in different shapes and sizes from ASIC, doesn't it? So there are different types of relief it can provide, and the most basic form is I guess a form of no action, which isn't technically relief, but it's ASIC saying we're not going to take action in these circumstances. So if we just loosely refer to that all as relief, tell us about stablecoins, and that sort of came out last week. So tell us more about that.
Of course. So probably two things there. So we did consult in the package late last year on a couple of product categories that we acknowledged and people told us needed some tailored treatment or some unique treatment. Also some product categories that we knew might be treated differently once the law reform came through. Stable coins and wrap tokens were two examples that were raised, and we consulted on did they need any different treatment. Feedback was generally yes, some kind of tailored treatment would be appropriate. We released a class order last week, as you say, which essentially resolved the treatment of the distributor, the intermediary, the exchange or platform where people might be buying and selling stable coins. So some stable coins we believe need a license under the current law today, because they might be a non-cash payment facility, or if they're yield bearing, they might be an investment facility. The issuer would still need a license, but intermediaries and distributors wouldn't, and that's the relief we published last week. At the moment, it only relates to named stable coins, but you can expect a slightly broader version of that when we update the crypto guidance when that package comes out. And likewise with wrap tokens, something along those lines for wrap tokens as well.
Okay, thanks for explaining that. So if we talk about licensing a little bit more widely, Chapter 7 of the Corporations Act, which is, I think it's almost doubled in size since it first came out in 2001, it actually names 3 different types of license. So we've got the Australian Financial Services License, the Australian Markets License, and the Clearing and Settlement Facility License. There was discussion back in December when ASIC changed it released its draft info sheet 225 that basically flagged the likelihood that, hey, some of these digital assets are actually regulated products. And so if you're matching them, like using a central limit order book, for example, and you're offering that service as a matched, like looking like an exchange, then that business might need an Australian markets license. Now, just to clarify the difference from a regulatory perspective, making a market would be you putting yourself legally between the trades and turning it into an over-the-counter characterization. That would be making a market. Operating a market is offering like a matching service, and that is what would need an Australian markets license. And depending on the way that you do that and the services you provide in connection with that, you might also need a clearing and settlement facility license. They tend to go together, those two. And I think there was a strong sentiment, at least from DECA members and other sort of traditional spot crypto exchanges, against going down that pathway, because the market integrity rules and operating rules very much were designed for that traditional ASX sort of standard market operator model. Now, time has passed, submissions have been made, Treasury has had time to think this through, ASIC has had time to think this through. Where do you think the Australian markets license, this clearing settlement facility license regime, what role do you think it may play moving into this next sort of 1 to 2 year phase?
I'm happy to start. Chris, you may want to add to this as well. So if I zoom back even a little bit further, Paul, so as you say, Chapter 7, which includes the AFS license, the markets license, the CS facility license, has been in place since the early 2000s, so well before Bitcoin and others came onto the scene. So that legislation, which is broadly worded and we would say technology neutral and business model neutral, has been in place for close on 25 years. Some digital and crypto assets will trigger one or more of those licenses, depending on what the services are and what the business models are. So it's not a value judgment from us as to which business model we prefer or favour, but as you say, if it's advising or dealing or making a market where you're a party to the trades, it looks like it's in the AFS license category. If you're running an exchange of some sort where you're matching arm's length buyers to arm's length sellers, and one or more of your products is a financial product, then the normal consequence of the law, as it is on the statute books, is that you would be operating a market, and the type of license you would need is a market operator's license. Now, not all crypto assets are a financial product, obviously, but some are, and we're seeing that category grow over time as well. So we do have one financial market license in Australia that is dealing in tokenized securities, and that concept is growing both domestically and overseas. So a suggestion that crypto or digital assets should never be in the operator market category would seem contrary to the underlying design of that system. So some business models are going to trigger the operator market category. They may be because they're dealing in a tokenized version of a well-known traditional asset class like bonds or stocks, or it might be because it's dealing in a crypto native product that happens to be a financial product. Maybe it's a tokenized money market fund or something like that. So the natural consequence of the law as it's drafted today is some business models are going to meet the definition of operating market, and therefore that's the type of license they need to apply for. We have a small number who are coming to us to talk about that. I realise others are still possibly in the wait and see mode, but Chris, you might want to comment on where the bill gets to on this one.
Sure, thanks, Rhys. Yeah, so the bill does not change the perimeter for when markets license would be required. So as Rhys mentioned, you're seeing more and more sort of financial product digital assets come out. So we wouldn't want to create a kind of a regime that I guess like watered down the obligations or whatnot on something just because it was a digital token, or just because it was sort of represented by a digital token. What the reforms do is I guess pull some things out, or try to provide some clarity about things that shouldn't be in the sort of markets regime. So we'll see when the hopefully when the stablecoin legislation comes out, the payments legislation, that the way we've sort of crafted it would have a sort of outcome similar to what ASIC's done with its release. So the stablecoin itself wouldn't necessarily be a financial product when it comes to the application of financial markets and the clearing and settlement regimes. Same with some wrapped tokens. Just because a token or just because an asset's been wrapped doesn't under these reforms doesn't automatically mean it's a financial product. So even though it would be captured as the issuer or the operator, the person doing the wrapping might be captured as a tokenized custody platform operator. If they're holding something like gold, creating a token, it doesn't actually mean under the reforms that the token itself becomes a financial product. It's just an interest in gold that's connected to this sort of non-transferable financial products structure, which we call a TCP. So I think like in future, I think is where we'd be looking at whether the obligations, the financial markets obligations are aligned. So I think in, was it the March statement the government released saying that we're looking at tokenization or markets for tokenized assets. We're doing a bit of work with the RBA on Project DECA, which very much looks at, what are the benefits of markets for tokenized assets, and one thing we would hope to get out of that is to work out what are the barriers that are stopping markets for tokenized assets sort of existing at the moment, if any, and do they need to be there? So are they still performing their job? Are the risks that they are designed to mitigate, do those risks still exist in the tokenized market kind of context? But obviously we haven't done the consultation on all that stuff. So at the moment, or at least with these reforms, if you trigger the markets licensing sort of obligation, then you would need to go and get one. But there's a lot of space there, I guess, for not triggering. So we're certainly not applying it to say something we would say isn't a financial product. So your Bitcoin, you can operate a market for Bitcoin without having without it becoming a financial market. But if you were to have a bunch of shares, you couldn't operate a kind of shadow ASX without getting a markets license.
Yeah, that's a good and helpful example, Chris. One of the barriers, as we all know, is right now, and our firm, like other firms, probably get lots of inquiries from people wanting to offer tokenized platforms. And the big problem is, even if you solve how to do it under the current law for issuing that token, the way that these tokens work and the way that the whole digital economy works globally is you get secondary market liquidity across decentralized and centralized platforms. And if something is possibly or maybe a financial product, you're not going to be able to list that on any existing crypto exchange. You'll have to go to like an ASX type platform to list it for secondary market liquidity if it's run like a market operator. And so the biggest problem has always been secondary market liquidity. I know there are some licenses out there that are like a managed investment scheme authorization, allows for the tokenization of the real property. And then if you want to then sell those tokens on a market, that license also has a maker market in interests in managed investment schemes, but you can only buy and sell through that one platform. You can't get secondary market liquidity globally. And so that's why I guess harmonization, which is a word that is overused and very difficult to implement globally, some way of making these tokens tradable whilst balancing it with consumer protection, I guess, is the challenge, and that's what you're trying to achieve. And it sounds to me like this is going to go a long way. These proposed reforms are going to go a long way to help with that secondary market liquidity as well. I'd like to also point to maybe the fact that, Rhys, you partially answered the question. You then talked to Chris, who sort of said how the reforms are going to sort of impact on that with respect to some underlying assets. Claire, that's an example of ASIC as the regulator and having some limited lawmaking abilities to provide relief to the law in some instances, have to work together. For businesses watching this, they need to be able to find a way to operate in Australia. Can you tell us about how Treasury and ASIC work together?
Yeah, happy to. So I guess it's one of the things, like, it's a well-traveled path. Like we do need to work together, but also, like, it's very important to recognize, like, we do have different roles, and it's important, just, I guess, for stakeholders to understand that. So, you know, Treasury, you know, we're a policy agency, we're responsible for advising the minister or ministers, as the case will be. It seems like our policy our portfolio expands, and they add another minister every time there's an election. But we will advise the ministers on what is the appropriate regulatory setting. And then the thing that we always say often when the stakeholders sometimes get mad at Treasury is the minister is the ultimate decision maker, and the minister will make the decision on what is the right regulatory settings. And then sometimes actually it might not even be in the minister's control, because it actually might be in the Parliament's control, and the Parliament will set the laws. So, like, from that point of view, then ASIC is the regulator, and their responsibility is to regulate and enforce the laws, and often that's as they currently exist at the time. And so you will hear, I have already heard Rhys say that. We do have ASIC say that back to us often. And so, like, that really does go to how we work together. It's about importance of understanding what we're seeing going forward, what's emerging, getting a lot of intelligence as well. Like, we really do work with ASIC to get an understanding of what they're seeing playing out in the market, because they will get a lot of intelligence from that point of view. We'll understand it from stakeholders, and then advice will go, I guess, to the minister about what is the right regulatory settings for the minister to make a decision about what are the regulatory settings that should play out, and whether or not changes to the regulatory settings need to occur. So I really do stress that we do work quite closely together, because we do see ASIC as a valuable source of intelligence, but we do play very different roles in the system.
Yeah, thanks for that. Maybe Rhys, whilst we're talking about dealing with interested parties or stakeholders, tell me, as a regulator, ASIC is obviously a member of ISCO. Australia is a member of ISCO, and ASIC is the Australian securities regulator that's dealing with all these other securities regulators all around the world. When it comes to topics like digital assets and the digital economy, how does ASIC deal with other regulators?
Yeah, it's a good question, Paul. And we had a conversation with our UK counterparts last night, so they are pretty regular. So ISCO is the grouping that we're all part of. They're all these securities, financial services type regulators. Occasionally these topics span into the banking regulators. So as Claire and Chris mentioned, we work closely with the RBA and APRA and others on some of these topics as well. ISCO has been doing a fair bit of work in the crypto and digital asset space, in and around tokenization. as well. So they've got reports that they've done recently on both topics. They have some crypto asset standards that they came up with a couple of years ago. They're doing a review of implementation of that as well. So they've had a look fairly recently as to how various jurisdictions are going with implementing those standards. And you probably know there's processes that IMF and World Bank and others also go through to test sort of international consistency against the accepted standards in that area. The other aspect that's a useful part of that process for us, Paul, is there are times where we need mutual assistance from other regulators. So you've mentioned already how globalized this sector is, and often cases cross our path where we need assistance from another regulator overseas and vice versa. We might get a request from US or UK or other counterparts for assistance on a matter that they're working on. So that operational surveillance and mutual assistance is important as well.
Yeah, and look, let's just run a few examples through. Can we maybe run an example through that, Rhys? So multiple times a day, I guess our firm gets asked. It feels sometimes multiple times a day, but definitely multiple times a week. We get asked, how do I launch in Australia? I've got a new product or service. I'm coming from another country, or I'm a traditional finance business, let's say, that wants to launch something in Australia, and they've got offices all around the world, let's say, or they have plans to get into other countries. Side note, all of our clients are at a very high speed, all trying to roll out more services in America. We all know that, and we've heard from some speakers on that topic already. But so going back to businesses that want to launch in Australia, we've got a financial services licensing framework. Sometimes those digital assets are going to be financial products. You're going to clarify that in coming weeks. So if a business today wanted to launch, I guess they would have to look at their offering and their proposals. That in the next few weeks, they would be reading your info sheet 225. They'd be probably getting advice from a lawyer somewhere. They'd be looking at what relief is available, because there's already a whole industry of unregulated businesses providing those services now. So there's a lot of businesses that want to provide services now. There's now a bit of some guidance of what this is probably going to look like with a bit more clarity in the next, let's say, 2 years. But as from a healthy regulatory strategy for a business in that position, Rhys, should they engage with ASIC directly, or is it just a matter of reading the guidance and, there should be enough guidance out there? How do you like it to be done?
Yeah, it's a good question, Paul. And if I zoom out, so the general answer would be, before you launch a business in Australia, you get the appropriate licenses. In the same way, before you drive a car for the first time, you get the appropriate license. So that is the general expectation. So I need to just reiterate that to start with. Now, acknowledge that this sector has some differences, and we are in the process of giving more guidance, and people need some time to digest that and respond to that. So like you, we also get regular questions either directly from firms that are seeking to launch into Australia, or firms already in Australia seeking to launch a new product or service. As you know, we have an innovation hub team, and their role is to answer those questions. So you can look on our website. Our innovation hub advice team are available to answer questions, take meetings, take phone calls on things like that. Minister and Claire mentioned earlier in the session, we have a regulatory sandbox that new participants use, and also some existing participants use to test a new product or service as well. And once you've gone through that process of getting some information, speaking to a lawyer or a service provider, yes, we're happy for people to come in and have a chat with us, work out what type of license they need and what the process might be. It will become, I guess, a little clearer over the next few months. So we're in an in-between period at the moment, and I acknowledge that's a slightly unusual situation, but we're not too far away from having our guidance available. People also have the bill available as of today, and can participate in both of those processes. So we've got a whole lot of clarity today with the bill, some more coming with our guidance in the coming weeks, and everybody should be in a much better position to assess what they need to do and get on with the job. Good,
thanks, Rhys. And I'd like to find out a bit more about the proposal loosely about upcoming conversations with Treasury and ASIC. But I would say before that, we've got more than 40 license applications, our firm does, on the go at some level of progression at the moment. But we've said to a couple, just wait a couple of weeks, hold off, let's just think this through. And so I think you will see an increased level of interest once that guidance comes out. I think there'll be a lot of people waiting, and I think through DECA there's been a lot of people saying that as well. So I hope your team's ready, and I hope ASIC can allocate a little bit of extra budget to your licensing team as well, because I know your licensing team's stretched. We've talked about that before. But tell us, and now Treasury and ASIC, I presume, will continue to offer sort of those sort of round table communication situations where you do field questions. Has there been any discussion, Chris, on Treasury sort of discussing these exposure drafts, or is that something that we can just expect to see, or what's the plan high level?
Yeah, so you can expect to see them, and I think some people have already got some messages for that. So I think like first cab off the rank with what it will be, I guess, quite an intensive 4-week period of consultation will be some Q&A type sessions that we want to hold next week. So that'll be sort of, some may have already been circulated, and we'll continue to sort of circulate them, and that will be a kind of more of an open forum for people to kind of ask their initial views. Ask their initial questions and the things that pop into their head when they're first sort of reading it, to make sure everyone's kind of on the same page about what we're, I guess, trying to do. And then sort of further on into that the consultation period, we will try and set up some more kind of formal type round tables where we're trying to get to the bottom of particular issues, concerns, and things that have been kind of raised. So yeah, people should feel free to kind of reach out to us during the period as well, if we don't reach out to you.
Yeah, great, thanks. And Rhys, once 225 is released, are you going to have any more of those sort of discussion roundtables, or what's the plan?
Look, we will have some kind of seminar liaison meeting process. What we're publishing is updated guidance, so it's not for consultation as such, but people will give us feedback as they need to. It is point in time guidance, so clearly it will need to be updated over the next few years as law reform happens, and potentially case law or other developments may require an update. But what we are publishing is guidance which will be our guidance until it next needs a further update.
Great, thanks for that. And look, conscious that we've only got 3 minutes to finish. Claire, is there any sort of closing comments that you'd like to make?
More, I'd just take the opportunity to really say we've got that consultation out at the moment. I think it's open until 24 October. So really, please get your submissions in. I'm going to take a plug for please get your submissions in on time. We normally get the flurry of, can I get an extension? So we are really interested in getting the engagement with it, and you know, Chris has put a lot of effort into it, including putting some quite targeted consultation questions. So look forward to hearing things with that.
Excellent. And just to paint the bigger picture for people watching this, the payment system reforms are going to be separate to this, but sort of hopefully around similar timeframes.
Look, so obviously we do try to do consultation periods for 4 weeks. Yeah. I always get in trouble when I speak on behalf of government, so I do not do that. But let's hope that they're going to come out in the next couple of weeks. We once again will try and do a 4-week consultation period. So we do really want to try and get them by the end of the year. And then similarly, we will be trying to get this the review of the sandbox kicked off by the end of the year as well. But that will be on a little bit of a longer time frame. So while it will kick the end of the year, it will go into the start of next year.
Great, thanks. And just for those people who don't know, those payment system sort of reforms propose something called a stored value facility, and that would play a role in the issue and the role of, that would be connected with stablecoins. And so some of the things that ASIC is doing at the moment is sort of this sort of bridging relief is what you could call it, I guess, until that's in place. So that really, like, we all know stablecoins are the lifeblood of all things Web3 and digital economy. And so those things will very much go hand in hand. So what we're seeing today is the first piece of information that is going, like, it's critical. And we're actually really grateful to Treasury for actually launching it today. And so that's probably, I'd just like to say thank you, Claire and Chris, for working. Like, the amount of hours Treasury has put in for this is just nuts. And so we're really grateful for you doing that. And DECA is also grateful for, I know that often when there's a question about technically how does something work, or how can it be implemented if we want to test run it with the digital economy sector, DECA wants to be that first phone call for you, and same with ASIC when it comes to this sector. We want to help, we want to give the detailed advice, and so thanks for agreeing to talk to us. We're just so grateful for that. Rhys, any closing comment?
Thank you for your time. Lots of people are engaging with us, which is great. Lots of people are coming in and getting licenses, which is great, in stablecoin and other areas, and look forward to that continuing. Thank you. Chris, last comments from you?
No, nothing substantive, but thank you so much for having us. It's been great to chat.
No worries. And Amy Rose, I presume that you're here. Oh, there she is. Hello.
Oh, I'm ready. I've been listening eagerly. It's been a really fantastic session, and the comments that have come through, some have said it is the best session of the day. When it is the longest, it's 50 minutes, but very, very timely. So really do appreciate your time, Chris, Claire, Rhys, and Paul. And also, I just want to echo Paul's comments earlier on in the conversation. The engagement that we've had with ASIC and Treasury has been profound, really. We haven't had this level of engagement, particularly over the last 18 months. And Rhys, you've been a catalyst for a lot of that over at ASIC. So I do want to express my thanks for that engagement and continued engagement. Obviously, we've got a long road ahead, but yeah, thanks for joining us today.